Love without understanding is not the full story. Real love requires understanding. Rational apprehension is a kind of penetration of the beloved person, nation, ecosystem, whatever the beloved is. Understanding is the higher dispensation. And these psychedelics, which, in the 60s and 50s were simply called consciousness expanding drugs, good old phenomenological description, if there's an iota of possibility that they expand consciousness, then we must put our attention on this area, because it is the absence of consciousness that is making our situation so very uncomfortable. People going for the fast buck, people elbowing their neighbor and their neighbor's concerns out of the way, trampling over each other. Low consciousness activity is the problem. The psychedelic experience is optional. You can go from birth to the grave and never come near this, never have an inkling, and most people do. First, a question I'd like you to think about. We can't discuss it here, but it's, are we, psychedelic people, different from anybody else? We make the claim that we have found the answer, that it is suppressed by an ignorant and intolerant world. We sound very much like the kind of whining that goes on among Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses or anybody else who has some screwball theory that if the world would but listen, then everything would be fine. So I'm very interested in this question, are we morally superior? Are we intellectually superior? Do we treat our children better? Psychedelic users, that's what I'm talking about. Because that's the bottom line, is, does it inspire better lives, more love, greater care? That's the question. As I say, I don't think of myself as a guru. I think of myself as a doorman. And I'm very happy to see people pass into the 4-star experience that lies through the fogged and etched glass. There's no other game in town. Doing art without this in your experience is essentially like trying to do art without good light, trying to live a life without the illumination of this experience is a far more difficult thing, because what do you have to guide you? The secular faiths, the religious faiths, and the obvious confusion that both have spread in their wake. This path is, alone in silent darkness on 5 grams, but it's not an easy path because it's the real path, and the fear is real, and the risk is real, and the reward is real. It's beyond hype. There is a subtle dance of energy, but it's not with another human being. It's with, and then you can either think of it as a mushroom, or God, or the universe itself, or Gaia. It will take all those projections with equal ease. It's like having an automobile, and you drive it around and it seems to work fine, but there's this button on the dashboard, and you never investigate to find out, what it does, what it is. And there is in us this switch, which can only be thrown by forming, until the era of modern science, very recently, could only be thrown by forming a relationship with a plant, with an entirely different order of being. And when that switch is thrown, this entire other dimension of humanness is revealed. the thing to get clear about the psychedelic experience is that, first of all, it isn't at all clear that it is on that gradient of spiritual development. We don't say here exactly what it is. Not that, you're closer to God if you have it, or you're closer to the source if you have it. All we're saying is there seems to be waking, sleeping, and one other thing, which very few people know much about, which is this situation when these self-transforming elf machines, squealing mantras come and talk to you. It isn't a void state. It may not be a mystical state. Now, what confuses the discussion is that at low doses, psychedelics are all kinds of things because they accept projection very readily and they grow beneath the strobe light of expectation, if you will. But the trick is to get to the place where your participation in willing the trip to happen is no longer an issue. You see what I mean? Once it no longer requires your cooperation, then you're getting close to the good stuff. And we all, myself included, are tremendously chicken shit about this because you can take huge amounts of these organic psychedelics and be nowhere near death. I mean, you can take doses that no one of us would ever consider. And an ordinary physician would say, well, he'll sleep it off, give him some oxygen, or they'll be all right, So we really just skim the lower edge of this thing. And this is a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, I have found this in shamanism in the Amazon, other places as well. The people are very cautious with the mystery, especially once they know how deep it can get. Because until you have had this experience where it's no longer you thinking strange thoughts or having unusual insights, it's that, reality has dissolved, the carpet is speaking to you, you can't find your knees, and everything has come apart. This is very impressive. And inside this place, it isn't as you might imagine if you had a reductionist view of brain function. And a lot of early psychedelic literature makes this mistake. They give you the idea that you're going to see beautiful patterns, drifting lights, clouds of transparent color. This is in the first 5 minutes as whatever it is begins to lock hold. That's called hypnagogia. That's not the trip. That's just your brain telling you that something is about to happen. When the thing really begins to happen, it completely transcends any kind of straight description of what is possible. And it's not a white light. It's not an undifferentiated void. It's much more like a place. There are entities in there. They are not made of flesh and blood. They're made of light and language, but they are alive. They come toward you. They're aware of you. You communicate with them. They offer trade goods in the form of ideas. This seems to be the currency of the other realm, is ideas. They're saying, what can you show me? Here's what we've got up today. And trade ideas. Now, if you were to ask a shaman, what are these things? What are these creatures in this other place? He would unhesitatingly reply, oh, well, those are the ancestors. Those are the ancestors. Those are the souls of the dead. Well, if we were to entertain this notion seriously for even a moment, our entire reality structure would unbuckle. I mean, we are much more willing to believe that it's friendly extraterrestrials from Arcturus coming to check on what's going on than that it's my dead uncle. I mean, that is just too weird to wrap your mind around. And yet, if we want to apply a principle of parsimoniousness, meaning you don't make it any more complicated than you have to, then we are living intelligent beings, and probably the closest you can get to us is our souls. So before you go off looking for extraterrestrials or fairies, you might consider the possibility that the human being is organized in some way that actually persists after death.